But we begin with our big story tonight. Donald Trump takes the witness stand in his own defense in a Manhattan courtroom just 2 days after his second straight primary victory in the Republican presidential race. Trump testified today in the latest E. Jean Carroll defamation trial against him, and even though he was on the stand for less than 3 minutes, well, he still managed to break the judge's limits on what he could say. He claimed that her allegations were false, said he wanted to defend himself and the presidency. There was already a jury verdict that her allegations were true, so he wasn't allowed to do that. Jurors are set to decide whether he owes Carroll additional damages now for calling her a liar after she publicly accused him of assaulting her in a department store dressing room back in the 1990s. So that jury in the previous trial found he did indeed sexually abuse and defame E. Jean Carroll. They awarded her $5 million. Trump is appealing that decision, and as this new case and as other legal cases play out in New York, here in Washington and in Florida and in Georgia, will Donald Trump end up using them as a springboard to help win back the White House? Sure looks like it. So joining me now for more, Avis News contributor and presidential historian Mark Updegrove. Mark, I want to tap into your view of our history. We have this spectacle which Donald Trump is reveling in. He's getting hailed into court on all kinds of allegations, from sexually assaulting and now defaming a woman, to try and overturn the democracy, to stealing classified material and lying about it. And yet he's winning. Have we ever seen a politician with this kind of hold that these kinds of disgraces for any other politician don't matter?
No, Terry. And I think he defies logic in every respect. He's like no candidate we've ever had, plain and simple. The legal proceedings against Trump, though, fit so brilliantly into his narrative, which is the deep state, everyone's out to get me story that seems to resonate with a certain segment of the population. And when he says that, I think he says that, I'm going to take the heat here. I'm going to fend off the federal government, this deep state attack against me, so it doesn't happen to you. I'm going to defend them against you ultimately. And it seems to resonate with a large segment of his base. So there's no doubt, Terry, that he will continue that in order to strengthen his campaign.
You know, I want to ask you a big question here. So Trump, is saying it's rigged. Everything that goes against him is rigged. Poll numbers, the ratings for The Apprentice, the 2016 Iowa caucuses, obviously the 2020 election, everything's rigged. And I wonder if his defiance here, which is so successful for him politically, undermines our institutions in general. People believe him. Everything's rigged.
Yeah, I think that's the risk. And we've seen that confidence in our institutions erode as a consequence, I think, of Donald Trump and this message that he continues to perpetuate. But you're right, Terry. He has been sounding this message for years, whether it be being snubbed by the Emmys, by not getting one for his hit show, The Apprentice. He said that the Iowa caucus was rigged in 2016 when Ted Cruz won. He said that the election would be rigged if Hillary Clinton won in 2016. He held out the notion that if she won, certainly the system was rigged against him. And of course, we saw what happened in 2020. And it simply doesn't seem to matter because unlike any other candidate, I think Donald Trump is more of an idea of defiance. He's almost an orange middle finger. And again, for those disaffected in this country, for those who feel alienated, that message continues to resound.
Yeah, and he stirs that anger, too, out there. Of course, I've never won the lottery, so I guess the lottery is rigged as well. But aside from what seems to be almost a farcical, refrain that he says everything that doesn't go well for him is rigged, it does look like we could see a rematch, right, between Trump and President Biden in November. So how would this political rivalry stack up against those past presidential matchups, and what do you think the stakes are here?
It's happened 7 other times in history, Terry, but it hasn't happened for 60-plus years. The last time this occurred was when Dwight Eisenhower, the Republican candidate, squared off against his Democratic challenger, Adlai Stevenson, both in 1952, when both were battling for the White House, and in 1956, when an incumbent Dwight Eisenhower was battling once again against Adlai Stevenson. In both cases, Dwight Eisenhower prevailed. Before that, you have to go back to the turn of the previous century when William McKinley squared off against William Jennings Bryan twice in 1896 and in 1900. William McKinley won both of those contests. So it's a mixed bag, and throughout history, there are times when the challenger beats the incumbent, as that happened with Grover Cleveland. He squared off against Benjamin Harrison, lost one time, won the other time. So that's the last non-consecutive president we have. Trump would be the next if he were to beat Joe Biden later this year. So it's not unprecedented that this has happened, but it's been a long time since we've seen two candidates square off against each other twice.
And a lot of it is unprecedented, but it's almost comforting to know that we've survived similar kinds of races, at least in that sense. Mark Updegrove, our presidential historian, thanks very much for that perspective.
Thanks, Terry.
Well, now let's bring this big story to our panel. And joining us today, ABC News contributor and Sirius XM radio host Mike Muse, ABC News political contributor and former Trump administration official Sarah Isgur, and president of Next Gen America, Christina Tintin Ramirez. Thank you all. And ABC News contributor, op-ed columnist for the Los Angeles Times, LZ Granderson. So thanks to all. Sarah, let me begin with you. Do these cases, all of them, do they matter to Republicans at all, do you think, at this point?
I think they absolutely matter, just not the way I think a lot of people want them to. They matter in the sense that Donald Trump has been telling Republicans that the left, establishment Republicans, the elites want to come after them and their way of life, and that he's the one preventing it. So then no surprise that they would sue him, criminally prosecute him. It's proof of the thesis that Donald Trump has been telling these voters.
And Christine, I want to ask you about Democratic voters and moderates and independents. Do these legal cases, do they help Biden make his case against him? Or is there a sense, even among independents and maybe even some Democrats, that trying to indict the guy out of the presidency isn't the way to do it in our democracy? That at the end of the day, if you want to defeat him, you got to do it at the ballot box. What do you think?
Well, I mean, look, what we've seen even from the polling of Republicans themselves, that if he is found guilty on one of these counts, that a quarter of Republican voters would not vote for him. So that's why he's trying to wrap up these cases and win the nomination as quickly as possible. This is a legal and political strategy to defend himself, to insulate himself. Look, with 91 counts and 4 cases against him, all he can try and do is lie and try and mislead the Republican base that this is a witch hunt, that he is some kind of martyr out of this. But E. Jean Carroll has already had a civil case decided in her favor that he was liable for sexual assault and defaming her. So I think this is a big message for a lot of independent voters, swing voters, especially women, that Donald Trump is not just, outrageous, but that he's also dangerous. And this kind of message, especially with the positions on abortion, are very anti-women. And so it'll be interesting what we see independent women voters do.
Key voting block there. Mike, I remember when Donald Trump first showed up for an appearance in court after being indicted by the Manhattan District Attorney, he was furious. He was devastated by it. You can see now that it redounds to his benefit, he seemed to enjoy himself. Do you think the constant attention and, look what we're doing here, distracts voters from issues that they really want to hear about?
Terry, that's an awesome question, but it depends upon which voter you're talking about. In terms of the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, this is actually what is driving them more towards endearing towards former President Trump. He uses these court cases as a campaign stump in ways that we've never seen it before. And if you look at the data, the polling suggests that once the initial indictments came out, you began to see an uptick in his poll numbers, and it's bode well for him for the primary race. Now, when we look at the independent and moderate voters, this is going to be a challenge for him going forward if he is the nominee of the Republican Party going into a general election. Then these cases will become a distraction from the issues, and he may find him vulnerable amongst the independent and moderate wing of the Republican Party going forward.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.